on Patreon, they get the video early.
I mean, the idea that they would, pay to see that is, I'm sure everyone says the same thing. Like, oh, who wants to hear what I
Who
have to
wants to
say?
see me?
Who
Yeah.
wants to see me? Like, yeah, nobody wants to see
Well,
me. For
everybody has a
me,
story.
this is fine because my favorite sound is, of course, the sound of my own voice. So,
Well, perfect. You're
I
in
could
good
just
company.
talk and talk and talk.
So yeah, and with that, we'll get started here shortly. You're familiar with the show and the format, I'm
I
pretty
am.
sure.
Is there a
So
format?
no, exactly. That's the format. As I've mentioned many a time, I learned that Larry King conducted about 50,000 interviews through his career and never prepared for one of them. So I feel like I'm in
I
good
think Larry
company.
King actually died, around 1985 or something.
And I don't know how they propped him
It
up.
just kept going, just sort of
There's a
on inertia.
backlog.
You know, he didn't wind down. He just kept
No,
kind of
he
doing
just,
the
and
same
that's
things.
I think that's the key to longevity, is to just not stop. And if you stop, then that's when your cells are like, well, I guess we're done.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I'll take a quick beat here and do the little intro, and then we'll get to the meat and potatoes.
Okay.
All right. Broadcasting worldwide from the Toadsuck studio in beautiful Central Arkansas. It's currently under thunderstorm and tornado watch, so beauty in the eye of the beholder. But you're listening to Bad Choices and Bourbon. I'm your host, Dan Decker, and my guest this week is my good buddy Jon from Twitter, but also, we've connected in a little bit more than just hanging out on Twitter. We got a nice little WhatsApp thread going and everything. So Jon, man, it's been a minute to get you here, but welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good to see you.
Yeah, no, it's actually, yeah, we've got the video going. So for the folks who want to see that on YouTube, you'll be able to you can watch
Right.
you can watch a couple of old guys shoot the shit for
Yeah.
better or
Yeah.
worse.
I'm one of the older people in this group. I mean, I'm older than you. I'm older than I don't know if there's anyone, in our little group
I
who's
don't
as old
think
as I
so.
am.
I don't think so. Maybe she's not in the WhatsApp thread, but Kelly, she might be in that same ballpark.
Well,
But
somebody's got to be the oldest and
that's
wisest.
right. That's I
That's
fit
me.
that role sometimes at the place that I work. I'm definitely one of the elders.
There you go.
So, is that your background there now? Is that actually a picture you took of where
Yes,
you
that is a
live?
picture that I took. One of my several hobbies. I like to ride my bike around, and I live in a part of Connecticut where there's a lot of reservoirs and water and thing. And that was early one morning out at a reservoir, probably about 10 miles from my house, and you could see the kind of the mist on the water. It's just,
Oh yeah.
you could see the bike in the background, as I like to call
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Enterprise B back there. Which there's a story behind that.
I love it.
but
I love it.
but it's just so nice out there. And I take a rest there because there's a hill just off screen. There's a hill. So
Oh,
I like to
in
take a
the
little rest just
still in
before
the wrong direction.
and then try to old man my way up the hill. So
Well, there you go. Man,
yeah.
I love riding bike. I haven't had one in years, and I've always threatened to get one. And that was going to be my health routine, was to just go ride and bike. Low impact, the city
Yeah.
here is relatively flat, and has become more bike friendly. But yeah, I used to be able to, you could tear through town on a bike, taking all the shortcuts almost as fast as you could get over on a car a couple years, a couple decades ago.
I like it so much. I mean, I don't like running because it is a little higher impact.
Hmm.
I don't like treadmills, and I have a stationary bike which I barely ever use because sometimes the weather is just what it is.
Oh
But
yeah.
to get outside, I have a bunch of different routes, and you can always come up with another route. There's always something to see. um, you know I understand that cars don't love cyclists. I don't love cyclists when I'm in a car. But there's a little bit of give and take. But it's just nice to get out. You actually get somewhere, instead of being on the thing where it's the same.
Oh
You're
yeah.
just not moving.
And it's
It's
good
so
work.
boring.
It's good workout.
It is a
I
good
mean,
workout.
you're
It is.
using everything. Plus, you're using your mind in a way that you're kind of unconsciously, subconsciously, it's the thing doing the work to keep you upright.
It is.
And so you're, it's literally you're flexing a different kind of muscle. And so that's cool. Yeah, I really need to. One of our key failings as parents is none of our kids know how to ride a bike.
Mm,
It's kind of and I've talked to other folks who have kids around our age, their age, and it seems to be kind of a thing with there's not a lot of, it's not as important as it was to us to be able to, that was the way we got out. That's how we went and
yeah.
saw our friends. They have Xbox and internet and Snapchat and TikTok. And so the impetus to go out and socially interact or be away from, why would you want to leave the leisure of
You've
all of
got
that
so
in your
much.
room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
So,
one of
um,
my youngest rode with me a lot. Like we did a couple of 50-mile charity
oh,
rides
dang. Yeah.
together. Yeah. Yeah. That was great.
Yeah.
It's so nice to be able to do something like that with your kids. Like when my oldest was 12, he was playing ice hockey, and I loved it. And I started to play grown-up ice hockey, with the old man league. And he stopped liking it as a kid because it got so competitive.
Yeah.
Like there comes a point where either you have to get into like travel leagues and you have to take it really seriously, or you have to stop.
Yep.
And he couldn't stand being yelled at by coaches and the other kids. And he stopped. And when he got old enough, when he was 18, he played with me
Yeah.
as a grown up. And the guys that I played with are so nice and they were so welcoming. Like when they every team sent a couple of guys to the all-star team, and I didn't even ask them to do this, but they all voted for him to go, even
Oh,
though
that's sweet.
like me, he was, not a
A
talented
hobby player.
a hobby player, but they were so nice. And it was great to be on the ice, with my son. I mean, I just felt it was just such a great experience.
Well, and I think you touch on something that we forget, that this shit is supposed to be fun, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that isn't to detract from those who enjoy, but my sister and my niece were in some of that competitive stuff with softball. And, on the surface, like they say, my niece enjoyed it, but I don't know, and maybe she did. And she was really good at it and still is, but I think she's kind of stepped away from it because, like you said, it's exhausting. But for us, like you just went and played Little League, and yeah, it was a little bit competitive and you
I mean,
wanted
we
to do
wanted to
well.
win,
Yeah,
you
you want
know?
to win, but it's not like at the end of the day, everybody gets an ice cream cone from the freaking snack machine or
Yeah.
whatever,
And like in this adult league, I mean, there were 6 tiers of skill level. We were at tier 6, which is the lowest. Um, and like we wanted to win, and we,
Yeah.
like a couple of times we won and we got a team picture, like a t-shirt. We got a t-shirt. And so you wanted to win, but like you didn't really care if you didn't win. I mean,
Yeah.
and that was perfect.
Well,
That was
that was
perfect
like,
for all
oh
of
my
us.
gosh. For me, most recent memory was in a bowling league with some friends, and this was easily a decade ago, maybe more. But one of the people took it incredibly seriously, and the
Yeah,
rest of them
that's
were just like, "Man, we just want to show up and throw the ball at some pins."
yeah.
Like, I am a terrible bowler. Man, my handicap was, people were like, I got called sandbagger all the time because I would have a one-off really good night. My handicap was ridiculous.
Right.
But on average, it was being, the handicap's the only thing that kept me from being just awful. And but it was league, and yeah, so there was competition and there was stuff on the line, but man, not that serious. And I
No.
only did it once because it it took something that I was moderately enthused about, which is bowling, and wanting to be a better bowler and having a
Right.
good time with it, and turned it into a competitive thing that I'm just not interested in that level of competition. I want to do well. I like to challenge myself. I like to. Um, I see it more as, I want it to be a kind of a quote unquote steel sharpened steel situation where me and my peers in the group are working to make each other better
Yeah.
in kind of a competitive way,
Well, that's why D&D is so great. You're not
Exactly.
competing against anybody. You're all working together. And even I always wanted to be the dungeon master for some reason. I played from a very young age,
Have you ever got to DM?
oh yeah, as a
Oh,
kid
okay,
I
good.
did. I
Yeah.
mean, and now all of my kids actually play now. and they're, my oldest is 28 and my youngest is 20, and they all have regular games of various. My daughter lives in California, my two sons live here in Connecticut. But even the DM is not there to play against the players.
Yep.
The DM is there to make the experience good for everybody, and there's no competition. Sometimes you have, the occasional chaotic neutral, chaotic evil character who wants to like be the disruptor, but that's not the same thing as competing against everybody. Everybody's there trying to have as good an experience as they can. So
Yeah. Well, when I DM, and I gotta take a minute to brag. First of all, if you want to play, I got a slot at the table. We're putting together a game.
I don't know if I have that kind of commitment, but
Yeah, no, I can feel that. Trust me. But there's also opportunity to. I'm planning they just dropped an entire book of one shots for any particular level. So like the Candlekeep Mysteries, it's you decide, okay, we're going to be level 5 players, and here's a level 5 adventure. It's a one and done, so no commitment, maybe outside of a couple of sessions, and something we can have some fun with. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later.
Let's talk about that.
I got a couple of people, Kelly, Commander Kelly, and Stevie Lee, interested. But with that that in mind, it isn't DM versus player. It is players versus the encounter.
Yeah.
And the encounter, like one of our biggest mantras is let the dice tell the story. My favorite replies are, you can try and let's see what happens, because the player should be allowed to say, I want to do this. Well, there are mechanics built into the game that let you do that. You just have to be creative enough. If your player says, I want to hug the bad guy, well, that's a grapple. Let's see how that goes.
Right.
Roll me this. And boom. Okay, so yeah, you grappled a stone golem. Good job. And now that gives, that took away some of his benefits. And then somebody was like, I want to climb up its back and wrap my cape around its head and blind it. I was like, well, we got to break it down. You can't do both of those things at the same time. So, athletics check to climb the golem, bam, passed it. You got to give me an animal handling check to make sure you don't fall off the golem. Next round, dex check, sleight of hand. Did you? Oh yeah, and they killed it, man. They spot smart and disabled it to the point that it couldn't beat them, and then they just literally hacked it to pieces.
That's great. Obviously the rules in D&D are just there as, there are guidelines, and
exactly.
And for the DM, it's all about preparation. If you're prepared, you're going to be able to handle those situations.
Yeah.
The thing that always killed me as a DM, and that I had to really learn how to structure a world for this, is that as a DM and you're putting together an adventure, you got a storyline in your mind. Players are going to do this, and then they're going to do that, and then they're going to learn a piece of information, and then they're going to do the other thing, and then the actual players come in and they go right to step 5, and you're like, well, wait a minute, but you got to be ready. You got to realize that they're not going to necessarily follow your storyline, and you've got to be able to account for that and still make the thing work.
So and that's the key, the last bit there, make the thing work. What I have kind of formulated is to keep everyone from being overwhelmed, because you can get quested and side quested and no one's keeping great notes, including the DM, and so you have to keep things in a manageable realm. Your players should only ever have 3 options, right? You can do A, B, or C. You're not limiting their choice, but they're not overwhelming them either. And you get a hook into each one of those. And they say, okay, well, I want to go with B. Well, guess what? A and C now become A, B, and there's a new C. That when you get to the goal of that one thing, you still have these other options. As a DM, you can't railroad that, but and the ability to think on the fly, the players can't ruin your story. You can let unexpected circumstances upset your narrative, but you could also choose those unexpected circumstances to move you're playing chess. If the players take you to step 5, well, then steps 2, 3, and 4 become steps 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah,
You can,
sure.
just
But
shuffle the
you have
pieces.
to. I think that you have to have that in mind when you're
Yep,
structuring things.
exactly.
That it has to be fluid. You have to be. If you're too locked in as a DM, then
Yep.
you know it's not gonna be as good as if you're. But if you're prepared, and then you can handle those situations like you're talking about. You want to hug the golem or whatever. I mean then that's great. Then you can accommodate that.
Well, and two, previous generations of DMs would have said, "That's dumb. You can't do that." Why are you calling it a hug? You need to grapple. You know, I- what is a hug if not a grapple? I mean, obvious. Hey, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I feel like the whole thing is the rules are a guideline, they're a framework, and then you do what you do what makes it work.
Well, like I tell people that if it's on it's on the title, it's in the title, it's on the tin. It's a player's handbook and a dungeon master's guide.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not rule books. There's a set of basic rules that we all have to agree on, and those are just the mechanics of the game. It doesn't tell you, it tells you how the game works, not how the game is played.
I mean, I got to the point, and I don't want this whole conversation to be about D&D, but I got
Oh,
to the
no.
point where like I had one of those players who, like he'll start looking monsters up in the monster manual.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to alter every single monster because I didn't want this guy to be able to look up the characteristics of the monster that he was meeting. It was
Yep.
supposed to be, your character doesn't have the monster manual with him. So you're going to meet some things that aren't in the monster manual, and you're not going to know everything about it beforehand. And
Yep.
it was a little bit of a struggle. You have one of those kind of rules lawyers, where,
Yep.
where you're in a little bit of a struggle. And it's not, he was a nice guy. It wasn't like we're going to kick him out of the group, but like, sometimes you gotta work around those obstacles a little bit.
Well, and it's a great parallel for
It is.
life in general.
I
You
think
have
so.
to work around those obstacles. But it's
My favorite thing is when people start trying to ban D&D because it's satanic or whatever. Like,
Oh yeah,
that's
we were well aware of the satanic panic. Our generation overlaps well there with remember Mazes and Monsters with Tom Hanks, and what a ridiculous. It was like a movie of the week, kids. Back in the day, they'd put on these awful TV movies that were essentially extended, very special episodes. But yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I could talk D&D all day long with anybody. I mean, just like if we and start talking about Star Trek or sci-fi, but this show is also about just getting to know people outside of those kind of shared interests. That's what draws us together. But living in Connecticut, is that where you've been your whole life?
No, I'm not far. I mean, I grew up in northern New Jersey.
New Jersey.
New Jersey. It's really not New Jersey. It's more like New Jersey.
New Jersey.
It's even
okay,
worse.
That's fair.
It's even worse than New Jersey. New Jersey is like if you're from Brooklyn, you might say.
But it's
New
got
Jersey.
an I in there. It's a little.
Chris Galligero, who is basically, I think I encountered you through him on Twitter.
Oh man, he's great, isn't he? I love Chris.
And he grew up in New Jersey. And this is funny because he's more your age than mine. So he's a little younger than me. But every cultural reference that he comes up with, it just, that's right in my wheelhouse.
Well, a good comedian is pan-generational. They're tapped into more, I think where a lot of modern comedians fail is that they're focused on that one target audience. Chris is like, he appeals to everything. And I stumbled into him maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, through his it was the police chief video.
Right.
I went, oh, classic. And I just pestered him enough till he followed me back.
the first one of his that I saw, I think, was how to speak New Jersey.
Yes.
And it was just, Ma, I'm doing a thing here, Ma. It was just,
you loved it. Well, and Stevie Lee's she's native from New Jersey too.
Yeah.
So, well, and then Connecticut.
So through Chris, I think I met you, and I do want to talk about how I met you because
I'm all about me.
It's important. Right, good. Let's talk about you. And then that whole kind of Star Trek group. I mean, when I started off with Twitter, it was all politics. I mean, I was just so into like what's going on every day. I'd wake up in the morning, go, what new horrible thing has happened on Twitter? And it was really affecting my mental health, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And as I started to expand it, maybe end of 2019, middle end of 2019, beginning of 2020, I just started to expand more and more Star Trek, just more and more Star Trek people, because it was such a relief, such a breath of fresh air. The people, and you and I kind of follow and are followed by a lot of the same people now. I mean, and that's really through you. And it's been so much of an improvement to my everyday life that, yeah, half of my Twitter is still, what horrible thing did Trump do? And half of it is, here's a picture of Rom because he's my favorite Star
He's
Trek
my favorite.
character. He
Yeah,
actually
see,
is my favorite Star Trek character.
Rom
But
right
and
here.
we can talk about that. Oh, there we go,
Yeah.
Rom. Nice. Um, and so with you, here's the thing about you. I'm a pretty sarcastic, snarky guy, and Twitter is the perfect place for that.
It is.
And you said something. Now I know now how much you love Captain Sisko. I didn't really know it at the time. So you said something in praise of Sisko. Isn't he the best? Or Avery Brooks, and I said something snarky about how he overacts in every scene. And, I said, sure, if you like the ham and I don't know what I said. And I mean, at that point, you could have come back and said, yeah, this guy, he doesn't get it, and just like blocked me, or said, I don't want to have to do with anything to do with him. And you came back and you just said, you know what? I love this actor. I love this role. I named one of my kids after him, and I just kind of took a second and went, you don't have to be sarcastic and snarky every time. Here's a guy who sincerely, not only do you sincerely, love that character and the actor, but in my case, for me, you took the time to kind of say, you know what, here's something that means something to me, and I want to let you know that. And something in me just kind of turned around there, and I went, yeah, that's right. That's right.
Wow. Well, thanks for that.
No, I mean, thank you. And I just,
I
and
remember
my
that.
approach, but my, and from there, I think I really began to branch out into that Star Trek community that's out there, and it's so good and has been so good for me. So thank you.
Oh, wow. I appreciate that. Yeah. Same for me. I stumbled into, I had my good friend Kevin. He'll be 2 years past coming up April 23rd this year. Just suddenly in the middle of the night, he didn't wake up the next day. But
Oh, that's such a shame.
it is. He was a good dude, and he was the one who challenged me to a lot of new ideology, and helped me become a better critical thinker. So big influence on me. But he, 2017, he had been on Twitter since way back. And so he was like, no, you really got to come back, because I was there for a while. I left, kind of quit social media altogether to get a head check, and came back though, to be angry at politics, like intentionally angry at politics, and found there is a community there, resistance as it
Yeah.
was, hashtag resist, right? And boy, I mean, hashtag toxic, honestly. And I found myself like getting into these follow back loops where, everybody had to follow everybody back. And that's, the whole point was more about how big you could get your followers list than it was about, even quote the resistance, like even being politically minded. And I realized that was not a great headspace. And so I sat down one day and I said, Dan, what is the thing that you like the most? Why aren't you engaging something you honestly love rather than something you are actively distasteful about?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the first answer was Star Trek. And so I went and I found, a bunch of actor accounts and started following all of those, and somehow stumbled into uh, Batleth Babe and Johnny Staggs, and from there it brought in the rest of this community, and of course there was this nexus point last year where we all started to think, to kind of realize that Star Trek community was a thing, and also the pandemic. So
Mhm.
it really, there was an ember that sparked a wildfire, and we all got caught into this, and I think we've all kind of collectively gone with the ebb and flow of, we're all hype and excited, and then, we all have to kind of take a breather and reassess what's happening in the community. And, it isn't all sunshine and roses, but it is way better than where we were
Yeah.
in politics. And I think the difference is these are real people who are willing to engage in things outside of their passion, Star Trek, and, like you and I and all the folks who've been on this show, and all the folks who I get the pleasure to speak with through DM. There's a real human connection there outside of we all love the same show or all love the same franchise. And I don't know that there's ever been an opportunity where something like that fandom could bring people together in a it used to only be through conventions that we would get a
Yeah.
connection back before the internet. And so those were fleeting moments of people that you knew you would love to spend more time with, but you just can't because distance, we've all come to the same place, but we all have to go back to different places. And now we're just all in the same place,
Yeah.
although we're from different endpoints. And yeah, it's been a huge improvement to me. And I've met so
Yeah.
many great people, and had an opportunity to, really grow the friends and family network. And I appreciate you being a part of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I think that there's something about Star Trek that, yeah, there are toxic Star Trek fans,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. But the fandom seems to me not to be as toxic as other fandoms, which shall
Mm-hmm.
remain nameless, like Star Wars, where it just seems like that one just seems to draw. And I don't know if it's because the Star Trek world is so optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
and so humanistic, and other worlds are less so, or maybe it's just that I think there's a process that you and I and other people in this group have done is a little bit of self-selection, that if there's a toxic element, it kind of gets cut out from the herd
Mm-hmm.
and left by the wayside. And every now and then something intrudes, into our little group that is a little bit toxic, and then there's almost like an immune reaction that kind of pushes back against it. So I think maybe there are other groups like that. I mean, and this is not a formal group. Obviously, there are people who are in and out, back and forth. It's really, I think, hundreds of people
Oh
in the
yeah.
end. And but something about it that has kept it so positive,
Mm-hmm.
and that's been great.
Well, and I think it's the fact that we all have a sense of in this together, and then we just come to reinforce each other. That you know, I've never been in a group of friends that is so like, it's okay to say you're having a bad day,
Yeah.
and everyone's gonna be like, yeah, man, I'm having a bad day too, but you kind of rock, and let's rock this together. And it's people will diminish that as something, but yeah, it really matters to be reminded that there are people out there who care about you, and
Yeah.
that
It does.
saying I'm not great today isn't it isn't pleading for clout. It's being honest with your friends. You just happen to have a platform where you can be honest with everybody. uh, and I think too it's that we've been conditioned not to discuss our feelings
Oh
and
yeah.
what they mean to us, and to kind of and people discussing their feelings openly makes other people uncomfortable, a lot of times. And but that part of it is to say, hey, that's not actually, it is okay to say you're not great, it is okay to commiserate.
Yeah, and I think
um,
that's maybe the positive side of the anonymity that social media gives you. I mean, that anonymity leads to a lot of people feeling enabled to be toxic,
right.
and that's been a big problem. But on the other hand, I think it also enables people to kind of say, well, there's a layer of protection between me and all of this. I can actually I can be open about my
Mhm.
feelings, and it's going to be okay. And we've seen some incidents over the last couple of years where people really have taken a chance and kind of done that and come out and express their feelings. and the group has, I think, done just fantastically well with that. And I agree with you. People will say, oh, it's, everybody can just click on like, or say, oh, I know you're having a bad day, and say something sugary, and but you're right, it does matter. It does matter that people see it and they respond to it, and they say, if you want to talk offline, we can talk. People are there. People are
Yeah.
there, and especially at this particular time with the pandemic, it's been a tremendous boost to me personally,
Well,
and I think to a lot of people.
oh, absolutely. And definitely, that plus being able to get the show going and have it as something to look forward to, and kind of mark time for me,
Yeah.
when there wasn't anything else to mark time, has been important. But, like that layer of protection, that anonymity, there, there is a bit of fabe to what I do on Twitter as the Commodore. It's a little bit of play, and in the name and the fact that it's a cartoon avatar. My reality is in that, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, that gives me a little bit of a buffer zone to be somewhat of a character. One more role that I play, but it's genuine. It's not like it's a persona, but it's a genuine persona. But this, here on this show is, we take that persona off, and and there's not a lot of difference, but it does give me, um, it gives me just that, like a buffer zone of, okay, you see this person on Twitter, and if you choose to engage with me, then we'll get to know each other,
Right.
and you'll see that there's not a lot of difference, but it kind of gives it just a little bit of, shielding
Yeah,
to,
and it's interesting when you talk about that. I think a lot of that, it's like acting. When you act, and I'm not a good actor, but when you act, you really have to put yourself out there. You
yeah.
really inhabit a different persona, that you bring yourself to it, and you really, it's a lot of risk. And when you look at the people that we're talking about, there's an enormous amount of creativity out there
Hmm.
that people are expressing. And I think that's the same thing. People are either they're doing cosplay, or they're writing stuff, or doing podcasts. And I think that it enables people to kind of put themselves out there. I mean, I think cosplay is I haven't ever done it. My son has, but I think that's the same thing. I mean, you put yourself out there, and then you go out in a group of people, and you're going
Oh
to be
yeah.
judged,
Yep.
and I think it's just a tremendous like release that it allows you to do that. And it's amazing to see how many people in our Star Trek group are doing Star Trek or other related creative things. And
Hmm.
you, I mean, look at you, you're doing all kinds of things.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm mostly just keeping myself from being completely crazy, uh, but I have a good time with it, and like that goes back to everything about this, is that you can't always have a good time, but you can choose to have a good time as much as possible, right? And there are going to be times when it's inappropriate. There are going to be times when you have to be serious,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I've gotten into real meaningful discussions by being just a lark on Twitter.
Yeah.
You'll put something out there that's kind of a joke about this particular scene or that particular element of Trek, but it actually comes back to a real discussion, or an opportunity to find out why that is important to somebody else, and
I think
it's
it's
really good.
incredibly important to, we can say, I'm a 56-year-old adult. Why am I, watching TV shows and like, fantasizing about them? But I think that there's something about having an inner life that's tremendously important. One of the things that the former guy was, criticized about, or people would talk about, is that he didn't read,
Yeah.
you know, and I just always think, like, how can you understand other people if you don't consume fiction, which allows you to get into other people's heads? That's
Hmm.
the thing of, that omniscient author can get you in someone else's head. You can empathize with other people. You can see how they feel. And I just think that having an inner life, whatever it's based on, having those thoughts, having those funny discussions that turn into something deeper, it makes your head work. It makes you think about something outside yourself. It makes you think about how other people operate, and it makes you a better person.
Hmm.
And so, to get super serious for a second, I just think it's it's so important, however you do it, to have that inner life, so that you're thinking about more than just your next meal or your next trip to work, or whatever it is. You gotta have that inner life.
Yeah, no, that makes a very good point. You've got to have something um that is more than the mundane, right? And I don't understand, like, recently learning that there are people who aren't constantly in self-reflection or talking to themselves, or have an inner monologue going or something, just a din in their brain. Man, what is that like? And
I can imagine.
I can't imagine. That's got to be boring. But that inner life comes from, I don't think a lot of people, or a good chunk of people haven't taken the time to go on the existential journey. It
I think
requires,
people are afraid to. I
they
think it's
are,
work.
yeah. Well,
It's
it
work,
is,
and
and
it
they
can be
look for an
scary.
easy answer. I don't have to consider the existential if I consider, a rewarding afterlife. I don't have to understand where I exist in a universe that is more immense than I will ever know.
Yeah.
And that you have to come to the realization that you aren't special to know that you are, right? In the larger existence, all of the time that you haven't been here and all of the time that you
Mm.
won't be here in the future, you don't matter. You are made of matter, but you don't matter. All you have is this brief, incredibly brief, hopefully 80 to 90, maybe 100 years where you can be effective, and you can only affect so much. And what do you want your sphere of influence to be?
Yeah.
You know, you get about, obviously, this is very relevant these days. You get about 6 feet of influence at
Yeah.
any given point. And what are you doing with that? And things like Twitter and being able to talk to folks through this media and, YouTube, et cetera. Um, it makes that, it shortens that 6 feet. It brings everyone closer into that bubble. But you still have to choose what impact you want to have.
Yeah.
And I realized, political Dan was having no impact whatsoever. I got no interactions with that stuff. I was just screaming into the void and getting Twitter strikes. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and since switching over to primarily Trek focus, I've only been in jail once, one time. And
Twitter jail, you mean? Not
yeah,
not the
Twitter
real one.
jail. Yeah, not
That was
actual
just a few
jail.
days ago, wasn't it?
It was just a few days ago, and I'll do it again because that guy was a jerk. Uh, but come to that understanding, and then like, well, I think one of the prime examples is Rashid. I always like to give Rashid props because um, almost everything he does is through the filter of friendship and positivity.
Yeah, he's
Um, you
so
know,
positive.
yeah, and
And
that
then
was
he,
one of
he
the,
shows pictures of himself, and like he seems to get younger all the time. Like
all the
he
time. Man,
shaves
that's
off his beard, and
frustrating.
like, how did you get 20 years younger, Rashid?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
understand.
no, it's I mean, it's good eating and well living, I think.
Oh,
I mean, if you've ever seen some of the dishes that his wife has made,
shows
jealousy
those
inducing.
trains, the trains tracks that his
The
kids
the
make.
tracks his kid makes, yeah,
And I
beautiful.
was I was watching one of them one day, and I heard train noises, and I was like, "That's crazy." And of course, I live about 3 miles from
Oh,
train tracks, and it was real trains, but it was
that's
just
it was in
kind of
sync
blew
with
my
the
mind a
video.
little bit.
Big love for the train. There's literally the train runs through town 2 blocks from my house. Conway was once upon a time in the record book for having the most railroad crossings in a 1 mile stretch of train track.
Anyway, I don't
Uh,
mean to interrupt you. So you were just talking about what were you talking about?
Oh, the positivity,
The
man, the
positivity.
positivity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Bringing positivity to the Trek side of things. And a lot of that too was after it started with Discovery, when Discovery premiered, and I kind of went looking for, what's the vibe on why do the Klingons look different? I just want to know, like, is there an in universe or a writers or a showrunners explanation, or and I stumbled into that side of the Mecha Random and the Doomcocks and the Midnight's Edge, and I realized that I wasn't getting the content that I anticipated, nor were I getting actual answers.
Right.
Which fortunately led me into the positive side of Trek YouTube with like Triangulum Studios and Steve Shives, and eventually Jesse Gender and Trek on the Tube, and all of these really great content creators who criticize the franchise in a critical thinking way,
Right.
not a critical way. Like, there's a difference between dismantling the nuance and disagreeing with story choices than there is over attacking the physical appearance of actors who are just doing their life's work. um,
I mean, look, when I first saw the first episode of Discovery, I was not a huge fan of it.
yep.
I said, I'm not going to pay for all access to get this. So it was a long time. I somehow got a free trial later and I started to watch it. But the people whose response to it is simply, well, that's not real Trek. I own this fandom, and that's not real Trek. I don't really understand that. And and they want to attack it because, oh, they're all social justice warriors. There's not enough like straight white men. There aren't any in the most recent season. And like I don't get that as criticism. Look, and I look at Discovery now, and I think in the last season, did we really need a 2-episode love letter to Giorgio and the alternate universe in the middle of what was like a 10-episode season? I was more, you can criticize it that way, but I just feel like I've really come to love the characters, love the cast. And maybe it's the time that we're in right now, but that cast seems to interact with us, the fans,
Mm-hmm.
so much.
In a genuine way.
I mean, like my wife got me a Doug Jones cameo for my birthday.
He's so great.
He is so
He's so
great.
good at him. He's
He's
so
so
good at him.
great. And like Doug Jones doesn't know me from Adam. And my wife gave him a few details, and he did a nice kind of 8-minute. It was just so nice. It made me feel so good.
You feel like he I've gotten several cameos from the crew, Emily Counts and Doug and a couple others, and they always make it feel like it is one-to-one. It is them to you. There is an aspect of it that you feel like they know, because they know you feel about what you feel about Star Trek, right? They get it in a level.
Yeah.
But you're right. This current cast.
And then what's better than Noah Everback Katz? A guy who was a Trekkie as a kid.
One of us.
Yeah. And he's like, that's the dream, right? Is to actually be on the show.
Oh yeah.
And he's so into interacting with the fans, and and obviously you had him. I know you had him on your show.
Oh yeah. That was a great interaction.
That was great. And I love that, but to me also a lot of that is what Star Trek's really about,
Yep.
and their attitude towards people.
Mm-hmm.
I've really come to love Discovery. I love Lower Decks. I think it was the best first season of any Star Trek show.
Yep.
And you can the thing that you love about it, or that I love about it, is that it's so obvious that the people who made it just love Star Trek. And that's what they're doing. They're showing you how much they love it.
You're old enough to know back in the day that if you wanted to get the fun inside scoop on Trek, you had to get the nitpickers guides.
Yeah.
Where they went down and they pointed out all the little foibles or all the cool things. And recently, one of those things was someone talking about, did you know there's a thing in the MSD of the Enterprise, and it's been in the technical manual since the technical manual was printed, but it was also those kinds of things were in the nitpicker's guide. And that was the fun stuff, like just kind of breaking down Trek where we made tiny little mistakes and things were a little weird. And that is what Lower Decks was. That is an animated nitpicker's guide, and it's great.
But it's done so lovingly, though.
It is
it's not done, sarcastic. Well, it's a little sarcastic, but it's not, like, they talk about how so many of the people who made Lower Decks also make Rick and Morty.
Yep.
And Rick and Morty is so nihilistic and
Yep.
so negative on everything. I mean, I do not recommend to anyone that they ever binge watch Rick and Morty, because you will not come out of
End
that
up in a dark
person.
place.
But Lower Decks is done from a completely different viewpoint. And yeah, it's people who just love it, and they want to just throw in a million references and guest stars, and I know a lot of people don't like it, but I absolutely love it. I can't wait for the next season of it.
I'm so excited for it, and and Prodigy too. I'm loving. There's never been a better time to be engaged with this. But
I love Janeway so much.
I'm so excited.
I really do.
So
I love
excited.
Janeway. My mantra on Janeway is homicidal Janeway is good Janeway.
Is the best
Janeway is best Janeway.
That's
and
right.
I just, when she gets in that mode,
there's a whole face and a hairstyle that goes.
I would follow that captain.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Anywhere.
Through a year of hell, as the case may be. But when, like you said, when I came to realize that there was this army against the new stuff, as it were, and I couldn't get any, like, production answers to those changes, I just instantly was like, okay, I don't care why they made those changes, because I'm not going to be a part of that side of this.
Yeah.
Because if the folks who put the labels on the tins say it's Star Trek, it is. I can choose to how I want to incorporate that into my enjoyment, but I don't get to say that it's not.
They
look, own it. They put labels on it.
Of the Kelvin universe, but
yeah.
I'm not out here saying, well, that's not really Star Trek.
It's like, just different Star Trek.
It's different. And some people really love it. And I'm old enough that I don't remember watching Star Trek, the original series, when it was being broadcast, but I know that I did, because I remember I was about 2.5 years old when they moved it to 10 o'clock at night, and it was too late for me to see.
It's too late for you to stay up and watch.
But growing up in the 70s, I mean, Star Trek was
everywhere. It was everywhere.
It was just, I had posters on my wall, and everything. And it's funny, you go back now and you look at that series, and there's so many bad episodes that are just hard to watch. But there's something, there's some thread that runs through everything there. And there are the great episodes, like Amok Time, to me, is just such a great, Mirror Mirror, and City on the Edge of Forever, and
a piece of the action.
Piece of the action. So many great episodes, but even the bad episodes, they have that. There's that thing. And when I grew up, when I was a little kid, we didn't have a color TV.
Yeah.
So I'd watch everything in black and white. And when I saw Star Trek in color for the first time, oh my God. Yeah.
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 That's what a lot of people forget about the production design of Trek at the time was just as much about blowing out the primary colors on those fancy new TV sets that RCA, parent company of NBC, which showed Star Trek, wanted to sell, and so that color had to pop in the window, and I mean, Trek just cranked it up to 11 when it came.
Somebody got me. I had a Viewmaster. I don't know
yeah.
Oh wow. Somebody got me the Star Trek slides, and it was like 3D and in color, and I was like, wow, what is this? This is a whole new thing. Yeah. So I grew up with Star Trek, and we were so excited when Motion Picture came out, and I don't want to go there because I didn't love it. I know a lot of people do.
Have you come to endear it though? Maybe a little?
I mean, the scene where they're in the shuttlecraft, the
cinematic perfection. You mean?
I love what they did with that on Lower Decks. How they extended it out to like
ridiculous.
That was great.
That's a handsome lady.
It was great to see all those people again. To me, Wrath of Khan was, okay, this is what I wanted, and so it was definitely a repair of what I didn't get in Motion Picture. I can watch TMP now, but it was not, and it's funny, it was only 10 years, right, between the end of Star Trek and Motion Picture, and yet it felt like forever. I mean,
it did. Well, yeah,
I was a little kid, so those were the
looks
years
like forever too. The difference in production design between the two is incredible. But I think where something like Wrath of Khan stands out is that set the tone for Trek till almost the end of Voyager. That those ripples played out through the rest of the franchise until modern day Trek. I think Enterprise kind of shifted tones, but just that look, the production design, you can see more of a connective tissue from that era to like the Next Generation and the way things looked and worked. Than there, felt like such a disconnect between original Trek to the motion picture and between the motion picture and Wrath of Khan. Of course, there's 15 years between the two. So
that's fair. That's fair. And then I do think that because you had these long running series, some of which had some story arcs in them, like Deep Space Nine, they were able to do some really, I think, some very interesting stories. Very, even though episodically. I know it's everybody says this, but I love In the Pale Moonlight. I think that is just a fantastic episode with
absolutely
with what Sisko is going through, and the scene where he confronts Garrick and is so angry at him for assassinating the Vulcan ambassador, and Garrick basically says, yeah, you, when you came to me, you knew that I was going to do the things that you couldn't do. You knew it then. So don't act all, don't act all self-righteous about it. It's kind of like that scene in the bar where Quark and Garrick are talking about root beer and the Federation. I love that scene.
It's insidious.
But after a while, you start to like it.
That's right.
But they were able to kind of investigate some of that stuff where your characters become a lot more three-dimensional. They have negative sides to them. And Enterprise, when it first came out, I was not a huge fan. And I recently went back and I rewatched the whole thing. And then I did it again with my wife. So I've done it twice in the last couple of months. And looking at Archer, he comes out of season 3 with pretty serious PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
He had to do some things.
Yeah.
And he is not happy about it. Like when he had needed that warp coil, and he went back and he stole it. He just took it.
Yeah.
And he, and a lot of times in episodic TV, people will do things and then the next episode, it's like that other stuff never happened. But I liked the fact that, beginning of season 4, he was in really bad shape. He was feeling it. And, I think that as the show has matured the whole universe has matured, it's allowed them to go in and investigate some of these things where, the people you like, the characters you like, they're not always good people. Like my thing about Janeway, Janeway is not always a good person.
Nope.
And you just have to go, this is a real person. She's got to be captain of the ship. She's got to make these decisions. She's got to decide what to do about Tuvix,
She is, she's the definition of lawful neutral. She knows what her right is, and she will go with that more. She listens to counsel, but at the end of the day, for all the behind the scenes practical reasons that Tuvix couldn't survive, because that's not how that show works. But at the same time, she knew what had to be done, and she knew that it had to be her to do it. The doctor wasn't going to do it.
No, he refused to do it. Right? He said, "I can't do that."
And she wasn't going to ask anyone.
And her face at the end of that episode as she's walking away, it's just, and I think that, I'm a big fan of Stanislav Lem. Bear with me because I'm going somewhere with this.
Go, bring it.
So Lem is, I don't know if you're familiar with Stanislav Lem, but he's a science fiction writer who grew up behind the Iron Curtain. And he became acquainted with Western science fiction through stuff that slipped through the cracks. And he became a science fiction writer. He wrote Solaris, a bunch of other things that you may have encountered. But he had some very fierce criticisms of science fiction about what a failure it was and how 99.9% of it's trash, and like the pew pews and the bug-eyed monsters and stuff. And the point he made was that there is something that can be done in science fiction that can't be done anywhere else, but nobody's doing it. And I think if Lem looked at Star Trek, he would by and large say it's trash, like it uses the trashy stuff like everybody else does, but that sometimes and this is what the one of the writers that he really liked was Philip K. Dick. And what he said about Dick was that he uses all the same trashy tools that everybody else uses, but he does something with it that's interesting and different. And I think that when Star Trek's at its best, it does that. It kind of fulfills that. Here's something you couldn't do if it wasn't science fiction, and we're going to look at it. We're going to investigate it, and yeah, there's phasers and photon torpedoes, and aliens who look like humans with latex on their foreheads, but we're going to use those basic tools, and we're going to do something that's actually a little bit transcendent, a little bit interesting, a little bit different. And I love finding those things in Star Trek. I despite the criticism, and I tend to be aware of the criticism all the time because those things stick in my head. But that's when it's at its best. And I think because there's been so many hundreds of episodes and movies, and they've had the opportunity to, sometimes they really get where no one else can go.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the broader point of sci-fi, things like that, stories that can't be told in any other kind of context, like, that explore some interesting ideas, like The Shape of Water. It's ultimately, big time love story, but, through a sci-fi fantasy element. And that kind of unique take on a love story couldn't be told outside of the, that conveyance. And Trek has an opportunity now with over 800 hours of such to, we can fill a lot of gaps, and kind of real quick on, just an extension of that point. A lot of there was a recent, real recent, but a conversation about the best way to introduce someone to Star Trek these days. And a lot of the advice was, oh, start here with this episode or start there with that episode. And my advice was, ask that person, what kind of story do they like? Because now there's a story in Trek in almost every genre. You want a Bond like fun thing, you've got our man Bashir. There's heist stories. There's gambling story. There's with the Royale. That's some intrigue, and you got something. Like we said, a piece of the action. You can have a gangster story, and so Trek now has enough of a catalog that introduce that person through something that they're going to be willing to engage with. And my thing has been not overwhelming with backstory, letting the story tell itself, and answering questions after the fact, then rather than going through and now you need to know, and that, but wait, one more thing, and the person, they're going to disengage. They're not going to want to get into it because they're like, oh God, I don't feel like I know all this stuff.
That's really a good point. And one of the things, I'm a huge fan of J.R.R. Tolkien, as I think I've mentioned to you before. And Tolkien, as he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, was also writing this huge world building thing that he didn't even think was ever going to be published.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I think really comes across when you read The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings is that it is situated in a larger world, that he isn't going to explain everything, but you see the kind of the reality of this larger world, and that you don't have to go back and explain the whole backstory. In fact, it enhances the story to know that there's a big backstory that you don't know all the details about.
Yeah.
How to introduce anyone to any great series that you love. Like I'm a big Terry Pratchett fan also. And I know what my favorite Terry Pratchett story is. I would never start someone off there, because I want to say, well, in order to get to the great stuff, you need to get to the good stuff first so that you can really appreciate the great stuff. Don't start with the best, start with the good, and then work your way up to the best so you can really appreciate it. But of course, sometimes you lose them before they get to the best stuff, and well, that's life.
Horror, we got horror. You want
we got everything. We got
comedy, we
space
got comedy.
battles. Space battles,
pew pews, we got the pew
intrigue,
pews,
love stories.
All of it. And it's really and there's sci-fi does that really well. There's so much out there. You get into Stargate, you get the same talk about a franchise that gives Trek a run for its money on. I think Doctor Who and Stargate are the only ones that come close to maybe The Simpsons. But is that really a franchise?
I love Babylon 5. I love Battlestar Galactica, but I think that none of them are as complete as Star Trek.
Well, and I think you can argue cultural impact, but there you could argue that against the other star themed franchise that looms off in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
As far as cultural impact
by the
goes.
way, love Star Wars.
I do too.
I think
Absolutely.
there's 2.5 great movies there, and and a whole world of other stuff.
Like, we didn't really need to know why his last name was Solo, guys. It's fine.
Well, yeah, that's my son is like that. It's like, why did we need to explain his blaster and the fuzzy dice? We didn't need to explain
there's
things.
Obviously, yeah. It's hey, those elements are there because he's Han fucking Solo. That's why, I guess they could have told us his middle name for all that's worth. And speaking of, I just realized I'm wearing, I'm representing. So
there you
go. Gosh, John, as you know how the show goes, I could talk to people forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
But that just means that we get to come back to this at some point, because there's no way we get to everything that matters. I mean, when it comes to
I honestly cannot imagine someone else listening to this conversation.
People say that, and then what's funny is this of recent contemporary note recorded with almonds, Ensign Almonds Raw on Twitter, excellent cosplayer. And she's been, very much the same. I don't know why anybody would want, but thank you for having me. And then, just the little chatter about it on Twitter. People are excited. They're going to be excited to hear you too. Okay. Cool. Don't be afraid to stand out. It's interesting to see the show has an audience that catches up, right? Older episodes continue to get plays, and new episodes eventually catch up. And it's just like everything good in life, let it age, gets better,
like a fine wine.
Bourbon. Exactly, like good
like
bourbon,
me.
fine wine. Exactly, us, men of a certain generation, men of a certain age. We just it shows in our face and in our hair, the fine aging.
I shave for you, Dan.
That's amazing. Yeah. I get in trouble with Kathy every time I shave. So, I gotta temper my beard trimmings with how much crap I want to put up with. But is there anything you want to say on the tail end of all of this?
You mean like plug something?
Yeah, you got anything to plug? You want to talk about?
I do a little tiny bit. Tiny bit. I have published so far one article on TrekSphere,
very cool.
Which was about Kodos the Executioner and trolley problems. So that's I recommend you go read it. I have another one that they're looking at right now. It's in the editing stage, and a third one that I'm currently writing, and all of them are on topics that are fascinating to me.
Oh, well, that's how you write. That's the best kind of writing, is to, you have to entertain yourself first, or you won't get it done.
And then I am currently talking to a couple of other people in our little Trek family about the upcoming miniseries that's based on Isaac Asimov's story, Foundation.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I hope I'm not jumping the gun by saying that we're talking about trying to do some kind of podcast related to that. We're still in the what do we really want to do, and how do we host it, and how do we, what's the theme, what's the structure, but we're talking about it. So I'm hoping that we're actually gonna get around to actually launching something and doing I'm currently going back and reading through the books, and there's a lot of good ideas floating around, and I hope that we'll get something good out of it. So those are
anything I can do to help you.
Well, I actually
launch and
might
promote
want to
that.
sort of pick your brains as to how some of the nuts and bolts of how you
works.
get yours from this conversation to publishing it up on the web.
Absolutely.
And
we'll
maybe
talk
offline
that
we could
backside.
talk about some of that stuff.
Of course.
So that's about it. Otherwise, I just lurk around on Twitter and occasionally throw in my still pretty snarky 2 cents on people's stuff. And
you don't always want to have a shiny 2 cents. You need a little rubbed up penny from time to time.
People need to know what I think about things.
Yeah, exactly.
They do. They need to know.
There's we are, yeah, we lack so much representation. People need to know our thoughts
Yeah,
and
exactly,
feelings.
exactly.
Of
Not
course,
enough old white
they
guys
say
out
as
there.
they,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Not all old white guys. Well, John, again, thank you so much for
Well,
taking
thank
the
you for
time
having me. I
to
really
be. Oh,
appreciate
of
it.
course, yeah, we're going to come back to this again, and of course, thank you, dear listeners, for giving us your time, attention, and your ears this week. Hope we've earned them again for next week. If you enjoyed the show, the best way to support is please share your favorite episodes from our podcast on Anchor.fm. And but if you are super interested in helping, you can provide material support via Patreon at patreon.com/DANDECKR. Otherwise, the show will always be free every Thursday, ad free, and continuing until I can no longer do it. So, with that, thank you. And from the Toad Suck Studio in beautiful Central Arkansas, I say good night. All right.
All right.
What do you think, man?
Oh, fantastic.
Sweet.
Again, it's kind of like it's just you and me